he was real, but he was also, and I mean this as nothing but a compliment, he was also really strange. I mean, he was he was a very odd bird. It was just like, this is, for all the kind of, I mean, I grew up with him the same way you did, and it's like, you have the idea of him as being like, dope-de-dope, Mr. Normal, and you're like, this guy is as twisted as they come in terms of what we really expect to see from.
The way I've come to think about it, I mean, he is an odd duck, no doubt about it. But I think a big part of his strangeness is that he talked like a child. And I mean that in the best possible way, which is that children are so direct. They ask what they want to know. They'll tell you how they feel. There's none of that stuff. As we grow up, we mask our emotions and our intentions, and we shield ourselves because we don't want to be vulnerable like that. And children don't have that. And Fred didn't have that. So when somebody comes up to you and says, I like you just the way you are, that may seem creepy. But in a way, he's just being brutally honest and sincere. We're just not used to that kind of sincerity. We live in a culture of irony. Everything is ironic. Our politicians are ironic. Our superheroes are ironic. Everything is ironic these days. And to have somebody who's just so open in his heart and open in his deeds, it's weird, but it's also incredibly refreshing and inspirational. Absolutely, for me.
Well, the funny thing is that I think some of the things that he had on his show, I wonder if they could be on television today, if on a children's show, in terms of the way, the kind of, what does assassination mean? I mean, it's like, I don't, do you think that would even fly?
No. I mean, even by the 80s, Fred was saying, look, if I came along today, they wouldn't put me on television. And I think of Fred not only being ahead of his time, I feel like he's out of time. Like, we still haven't caught up to what he was doing. I mean, the kinds of things he was doing didn't have a name. Now we talk about things like mindfulness and emotional maturity and emotional intelligence and slow culture. All these things, they're like apps on your phone for now. He was doing 50 years ago. But I still feel like in children's television, for the most part, it's always been about selling, sugar and toys. And for the most part, it still is. And even as much as I love, Sesame Street, Sesame Street was heavily merchandised and heavily kind of sold. And I had a lot of that stuff too. But Fred, for instance, turned down every merchandising dollar. He said, if I sell something to a child, then I'm polluting the relationship I have with them. So he refused to ever do anything. And, we used to have a scene in the film that didn't make the final film, but we had a scene like a Sesame Street versus Mr. Rogers scene. And there's all this footage of, Sesame Street on ice at Madison Square Garden with 15,000 kids.
I went to that.
Yeah. And then, Fred refused to ever perform in front of more than 30 children. And he would rather do 22 15-minute shows a day for 14 hours for 30 kids than to ever get in front of 1,000 kids at once. It's those kinds of decisions that just shows you that he was walking the walk in every single instance.